Let me tell you something. That beat right
Hello.
there.
Hello.
That beat is like crazy.
you,
I love that beat. We can
you
walk in
love our beat?
like background music. Background music when the doors open to the courtroom.
Oh, can you imagine? I
That
don't know if
music
the
is.
judge would appreciate that. I don't know if the judge would
I,
appreciate that too much.
know, but the court officers and the clerks and the juries, they would love it. They're like, all right, I see what's going on.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are glad to be back again for another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural each and every week with our two legal experts, Royce Russell Esquire and Edward Pichardo Esquire. So thank you for tuning in, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here. And before we get into the show, and there's a lot to talk about today, just like last week, of course, my dear co-hosts want to give their greetings. And I'm Dr. Stacey NC Grant, if I didn't properly introduce myself. So over to you, Mr. Russell. How are you doing today? Besides enjoying
I'm
the
doing
music.
okay. I can't complain. I'm waiting for the warm weather to settle on in. Glad that the sunlight is out. I think soon on the show we might be talking about doing away with daylight savings time. I mean, that conversation has been coming up, ever so often, ever so often. So, maybe it'll catch some traction. But we know, as we will reveal today, a lot of different laws have caught a little traction. A lot of things that are going on here that legally we want to touch, but really speak to some of the cultural nuances that lie within, folks of color. So welcome everybody. Enjoy the show. Easy is up to you, baby.
Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, mi gente. Hola, bueno verlo. Thank you for coming here today to viewing us on our show. I'm sure you're going to find all the information educational and uplifting. Good afternoon.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So before we get into the meat of it and I take care of some background stuff, I want to talk about a few people who transitioned. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Mr. Russell, while I handle some studio business. So you can talk about Mr. Haskins, one of the
Yeah,
first people that we want to just pay respect to.
it's definitely unfortunate that he passed away. And I just so happened that I had my mug here and it got the Miami Dolphins on there because I'm a longtime Miami Dolphin fan. And how does that relate to our show today? It relates to our show because rest in power, brother Dwayne Haskins was a professional football player, and he was number one draft pick, quarterback. And if you know anything about sports, and you know anything about the NFL, and you know about the history of a person of brown descent, black color, you name it, black or brown, playing quarterback, you know that it's always an uphill battle. And for him to be drafted as a number one first round draft choice, I believe he went to the Washington. Now they call them the Commanders. And then he was traded over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. For him to lose his life tragically by being hit by a truck, is so unfortunate because anybody who knows sports now, the former superstar for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, he just retired as the quarterback. So Pittsburgh was waiting to see what Brother Haskins had to bring to the table as a quarterback. And if you want to follow a little bit of controversy even further, remember Brother Tomlinson, who happens to be a member of my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, one of the most winningest coaches out there, definitely of African-American descent and otherwise. I think he has 15 straight seasons of making the postseason or having a winning record, something of that nature. And he brought in Brother Brian Flores, who ousted out the NFL in this fake Rooney Rule. And so he brought a brother in. And so it would have been nice to see that team flourish. Brother Haskins.
Yeah, no, I feel it's really tragic. When I heard about him getting apparently hit by this truck, I was like, what, on an interstate highway? I'm like, how does that happen? He was at his, he was about, because Ben Roethlisberger, the multi-year or the quarterback for the lead quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, retired this year. So, he was in contention for the starting spot.
Not only in contention, they had nobody. They brought over Trubisky or somebody.
Well, you know what I mean, because what happens is at the beginning of the season, you have training camp, and that's where even if you're slated as a starter, you still have to prove yourself, right?
Look, in his case, it was in his spot to lose.
Yes.
It was in his spot to lose. But yeah, you're correct. Definitely.
Yeah, so it's kind of unfortunate because the last year he was in the waiting, waiting to see what was going to happen, and then now he was going to finally get his chance. And for this to happen, it's like, may he rest in peace and power. I feel so bad for his family. I believe some of the latest news is that there was like some 911 calls the morning of, so I'm not sure what that's about, if that's going to shed some light as to what exactly occurred here.
And one of the things that we should take away from this story is that he was set to be a superstar. He was still in his rookie contract years. He wasn't in the league more than 4 years. I think in the 5th year, that's when your contract then matures. So we really don't know what his financial state was, right? People assume, oh, he's a football player, he's making a lot of money, his family's going to be okay. That is not always the case. You have these rookie contracts and the numbers are very stagnant, and you might get bonuses, and your base salary might increase based upon you reaching certain incentives. But in his case, he did not take the field a lot, and this was going to be his chance to do that. So just a little cultural legal knowledge you need to take with you.
Absolutely. And as a mother, I just can't even imagine. He's the same age as my oldest son. So, it just, wow. All I can do is just say prayers going up for the family, because, while this is public news, it's still a private matter for them. And we definitely will be praying for them. And there's another family to lift up as well. A very well-known DJ Kay Slay, unfortunately hearing tragedies and those succumbing to COVID. It's still happening. The virus has not gone away, and we send our condolences as well to his family and all of his fans in New York City.
Yeah, this is unfortunate.
Yeah, DJ Kay Slay, go way back. See, a lot of young folks don't know who he is. We talking Magic time, we talking Red Alert time, we talking way back when. And before he was a DJ, he was in a group. So, you talking Stretch Armstrong, you talking about these guys that go way back, the DJ Clarks, that go way back. Even before like D-Nice, going way back. So, definitely rest in power, brother.
I mean, he came, he came into fame definitely during that mixtape era, where you were getting some of your music over the radio, but certainly the streets were filled with the mixtape. And in fact, a lot of artists started making independent music on those tapes, and that became the medium by which hip hop was being distributed on the streets. And then Kay Slay was one of the DJs that ruled over that era for sure. So may you rest in peace, DJ Kay Slay.
And you got to know how the business works, right? You just don't get a job being a DJ on major radio, right? People got to hear about you. People got to know your work. You got to put in time. I mean, one of our good friends, DJ Tommy Allen, who's on many of a radio station, he had to put in time. You got to put in major time to get recognized. It just doesn't happen overnight. And so you can imagine how many DJs out there, how many air spots are there, because I don't know about you, there's certain slots I listen to. Red Alert is on, that's my slot. You know what I'm saying? When Magic was on, that was my slot. DJ Clue was on, that's my spot. You gotta, it's you really rubbing the road really hard to find a spot, a space and time on radio, and he was able to do that.
And I'm a little young for the era, but
here we go.
And I just want to go slightly off. I want to just go slightly off script with my co-host now. In terms of the hip hop scene, I don't know if you heard about Kid Creole. He was recently convicted of manslaughter in the stabbing in an individual, and I knew about the same time I
Yeah.
heard about this, which is unfortunate.
Oh
Another hip
wow.
hop fan. Yeah.
Right.
So
That case was
No,
pending
I
for a
didn't hear
while.
about that.
I
yeah.
think he was representing himself for a while. He'd been through several attorneys. It was an issue of hard times. The incident in and of itself seemed like it was senseless. You know, a little. I don't want to call it little because someone lost their life. But as we say in the street, a beef within the building. Who's following who's doing what? You know, it's a sad day for the music industry, given those two deaths. Because when you're sentenced for a murder, that is a death. That is a
Yeah.
spiritual.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, no, I didn't know about that. Thank you for telling us, Senor Pichardo, for sure. And the lives that are affected as a result of it. To your point, Mr. Russell, when something like that happens, it's more than just you that's affected, but that is a spiritual death of being, locked up. I
No,
can't
no,
even,
no,
I did
no.
outreach work, and that's overwhelming just even going by and, trying to be there to encourage those who are coming back out. I can't imagine a lifetime or
Now
a sentence that'll have
I,
you there for more.
I have done work as a prosecutor, trying homicide cases, and knowing that the person that is convicted, that is like a death sentence in and of itself, even though you're not sentenced to death. I have litigated and settled wrongful death cases, people killed by the police. Once again, someone's dying. There is no real satisfaction. There may be some closure, but there really isn't any satisfaction, even if the officer is terminated and or sentenced. There is closure, and we want that. We call that true justice when something like this happens, if the facts warrant that. But it's everybody loses. Everybody loses in a trial like that.
Yes. Well, we will definitely thank you for letting us know that additional information. That there's one more person that we will recognize as well. Archie Eversole, I believe, is the younger artist that recently passed away. So
Yeah,
we want
I
to,
wanted. I'm sorry. I wanted to make a point that we bring this up because I didn't know who the brother was, right? And that's not because he wasn't important, because everybody's relevant in the world in their own right. But you have these young artists that are coming up, as Ed said, mixtapes, underground, maybe didn't have a deal yet. I'm so ignorant to him that he may have had plenty of deals, because the music that's coming out nowadays, you don't know who's doing a hook on somebody else's song and who's doing what. And that's just, a reflection of me getting older. But I just wanted to make sure that we recognize Brother Archie, because clearly he was an up and coming rapper in the Atlanta scene, and folks knew who he was. So
yeah,
rest in
yeah, and rest in power. And our children tell us about some of these individuals and who they are, and it just like when we lost anyone when we were their age, it's a lot to process. And with COVID and everything that we've seen, the trauma of loss, the trauma of murders, the trauma of death, it's a lot. Like we have to check in on each other as we ingest all of this, especially in the news, because it can really be draining. So I'm grateful that we are able to just acknowledge their life, because that's important. And then those who carry their memory and their work, that's one thing. The work that you do will live on past you. So it's important to live a life that has meaning and has substance so that it can impact. So now as
Dr.
we
Grant,
transition into, Mhm.
Dr. Grant, I do want to make sure before we transition to the next storyline, and because we are speaking legally and we do tie the culture to what we do, we have to recognize that last night being Tuesday, was the season finale of Blackish. Now we can't be on this show here
Oh yes.
speaking legally, and we don't say something about Blackish. Like, that would be blasphemy, right? We take all our cards and
Yes,
just throw them in the
yes.
garbage, you know. And I think it's appropriate to talk about it now. Not that we want to make light of anybody that passed away and rest in power, but this is a passing. This is it's done. You're not going to see it anymore. And now, understand where I'm coming from, folks. Understand. I want you to really understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully, I'll live a lot longer than today. I started out with a family TV show that was The Good Times. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go research it. It was called Good Times. We went from Good Times to the Cosbys. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. Then we went from the Cosbys to Blackett, all syndicated, all on TV now, forever running. And I would say each one of those shows emulated and parallel my life. Give you a little something. Go watch Good Times. And then you come back and you watch Speaking Legally. You say, wow, you came from that? That's what you call Good Times? Because the title was ironic and wasn't really Good Times because the family encouraged so much strife, but it was Good Times because they had love. But they were working poor or just working, living in the projects, and every day was a good day until it became a bad day. And then you move to the Cosbys where now people are doctors, they're lawyers. Their mindset is the mindset of my era in that old school, hard knocks, up by the grave. Talk to your grandfather, he'll tell you I walked a mile of school, that type of deal. And then you move to Blackish, which is super duper contemporary, where dad is wearing sweatsuits, looking fly, got his baseball cap, got his glasses, got his Gucci sneakers. I mean, he's right in there with the kids. Like the kids can't pull nothing on him. There's some disparity in what one may like or not like, but yet the torch is passed. And we watch that Black family grow as a unit, face different times as middle class, upper middle class, not just middle class, upper middle class in a suburban area, face racism, face all type of culturalism and implicit biases. It was a wonderful show, and it is gone. And now you can only see it on syndication. And brother Anthony Anderson, co-produced it. Who would have ever known, right? You just see him as an actor. He's behind the scenes. Hey, look, anytime you get Lawrence Fishburne to come off the big screen to do a TV sitcom and stay on there 10 years, 12 years straight, come on now. You pulling some weight.
That's saying a lot.
And you know what I found out the other day? I found out the other day that Yara Shahidi, the oldest daughter, is actually related to Nas.
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What way?
He is his niece.
That's his niece, huh?
Yeah.
And it's something interesting about that, because I always wonder how these people get these opportunities and how they wind up where they wind up. And then when you do a little research, you kind of find out, not that Nas put him there, but it's like it's a connection, right? It's like, it's like what we see in some of our fellow Anglo-Saxon families where, the father's a lawyer and then the son become a lawyer, and it just kind of runs, that entertainment kind of flows. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. But once again, like I said, I think it was appropriate to talk about it because
Nas is our cousin. That's what he is. He's our cousin.
He's a cousin. All right. You won't see it again. Yeah. You will not see anything like this. I don't think they could come out with another show like this to resemble.
No, this is, well, I mean, I wouldn't say never, right? Because no one thought Good Times would be here. No one thought The Cosby Show would be, and no one thought Blackish would be. So there will be a new iteration with the innovation in our community of something that resembles where culture and life is going. But I do agree that this was an excellent production. It touched on every area and part of the Black family experience, whether you were living their lifestyle or some of the other characters that represented different lifestyles within our community. And where the legal meets the cultural, there were so many legal issues that they infused, even with the murder of George Floyd, and that it was just so tastefully done. And they did Juneteenth as well. And just that balance of humor with the reality of the world, it also opened up a teaching. There was so much that you could teach from each episode. It was a teachable moment. It was laughter and comedy. It was emotion. I missed the last episode, so I'm looking forward to just sitting down without distraction and just absorbing it. But the fact that it is in syndication is wonderful, right? That they will continue to get paid for this, their time, their effort, what they brought together. I caught a little interview with our two main actors here with, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. And she was mentioning that they haven't been friends. They knew each other because of Hollywood, but they really didn't know each other. And the working together and just building a real partnership was so critical in the show's success. And you can see that in how their chemistry carried on screen, that it was believable and that no storyline was too far-fetched. So I agree with your sentiments. We could not move on with today's show without taking a minute to pause when we talk about the cultural and what this show represents for the culture and the spinoff, you know, that what is
Grownish. Grownish.
Grownish. Yeah, Grownish. I have, yeah, the spinoff. And there was another one that was coming, Mix-ish. I don't know if that came off the ground yet, but just the fact that there was some groundwork that was laid to open up for the next innovative way in which our story is told. The bottom line is, we've said it on this show numerous times, you can't be what you don't see. You can't have and create opportunities for growth and difference if you're never exposed to it. And that's why we're spending this time talking about it, because this show is an opportunity for us to talk about the legal issues, but culturally, how do we really pay tribute to those who came before us? So thank you for flagging that for us, Mr. Russell. Mr. Pichardo, any final comments before we move on until the not so nice part of the show when we have to talk about the truth that's happening in these streets?
No, just simply to say, you know, I think the creativity provides for limitless opportunities. I mean, we're going to see other shows that give us a different take on Black life in America. I'm almost certain. You know, I'm just waiting for the next one. You know, you let a show like this end, and then you let others come. I mean, and there's others that have come and gone. I think of Bernie. I think of, you know, although there's so many, it's hard to even start making a list, but there'll be more.
We hope so. And we hope they inspired some great, because it's not just having a show, but a show of such quality and great content. But now we are going to move into some of the legal issues of the day. Last week, we touched on this particular law, or I don't even know what stage it is now, because this was in February. They proposed banning close-ups on videotaping of police officers in Arizona. And we kind of touched on that at the end of the show last week. But, you know, if you do your due diligence and searching and finding out more about it, there's a reason why we're bringing it up today. But isn't it interesting that they would go as far to propose such a ban after the murder of George Floyd? Because without that video footage, we might not have had the outcome that we had in this case.
Well, you know, it's kind of this reversal thing where, you know, let's start blaming others instead of the perpetrators. There was this discussion, if you recall, during the George Floyd incident, where there was a claim that they were being distracted by people coming up close to videotape them. And then, you know, you fast forward to the protests that followed after, where many were being arrested for videotaping arrests, videotaping the brutality that was taking place against people who were simply exercising their First Amendment rights. You know, the bottom line is that you have a right to videotape as long as you're not interfering. And in the George Floyd incident, you saw no one interfering in the actions of these officers. This idea that anyone came close enough to in any way distract, hamper, or obstruct what they were doing is just completely, you know, it's completely false. I'll let you continue and piggyback.
Well, I think what the powers to be have created, in knowing that what you just said is a falsehood, they have couched it differently. Now they're couching it from a standpoint of safety. Now they're trying to make the civilian be the hero, in that we're trying to protect you. So it's best that you stand back a certain number of feet, right? Which begs the question, you really concerned about my safety when I'm filming you? You really concerned about me getting hurt when I'm filming you? Do your job? Let me look at how many cases are in the Supreme Court or any courtroom where someone who's filming is suing the police because the person that they were arrested hurt them, and the police were negligent in not watching that individual. Usually what happens is the person is filming. If they do sue, they are suing the police because the police are attacking them for filming, right? It's the kind of idea, defense of a third. The police is defending you, protecting you from this person that they are arresting because you might get too close and you might interfere, and then that person will be free or you'll get hurt. And so they're trying to couch it as a safety, not a violation of the First Amendment rights, because they know that will go nowhere. And even though it's not stated within the First Amendment of the Constitution that you have a right to video, because the forefathers moved that forward thinking, that is stated within case that is a First Amendment right. So if they couch it as safety, then maybe it can get by. And with the Arizona legislation and the powers to be, they try to hang their hat on a Supreme Court case. I can't recall it right now, where one of the justices talk about 8 feet being reasonable. Now, here's the funny thing about practicing law, and I'm going to tell you something about it. And you see it in the media. It is easy to take a line and use it in a quote for your self-interest and try to say that that's the rule. So in the Supreme Court decision, when they were talking about the 8 feet, they were just pontificating that they felt that 8 feet was reasonable. Now, it was reasonable given the facts that they were talking about, and that standing 8, as a matter of fact, what they said is that 8 feet wasn't unreasonable, that it wasn't unreasonable that the person was 8 feet away and this still happened to them. So like you had enough room to do what you need to do. So now what Arizona did is jumped on that 8 feet number and they expanded to like 10 or 15, like you need to be 15 or 20 feet because the Supreme Court said that 8 feet is not unreasonable. So now they try to use that as a standard. So it's taking something out of context and trying to use it as a standard to create new law, which the reason why we bring this up is because if you stay prepared, you won't have to get prepared. And these are the things that are going on every single day that we're not focusing on. See, they're planning their work and they're working their plan. And what we do is we get it on the tail end. We get the reaction. We don't get the proactive. So you just got to keep your 5 senses alert. Eyes, ears, and listen. And see what's going on. And catch it when they try to bring it.
Yeah, and just for the edification of the audience that hails from here in New York in particular, the NYPD patrol guide explicitly says that citizens have the right to videotape an arrest and doesn't prescribe any sort of footage for the allowance of that as an instruction to their own officers. So, just keep that in mind. And like Roy said, we're supposed to stay ever vigilant that no conservatives in our state start thinking about adopting some of these types of laws.
Oh no!
And let me add on one other thing. It's not like the Freedom of Information Act, right? What we call FOIA, right? It's not like the Freedom of Information Act or the police departments here, in the tri-state area or throughout, are being very liberal with revealing and showing and giving of body cam information and footage. There's always a struggle with that. So even if the legislator or the politicians to be in power were to say, well, look, there's really no need to film because we're giving the body cam and that's why we got the body cam. No, don't fall for that trick because we fight every day to get body cam footage. Who determines when the body cam comes on, right? So once again, it's about implementation. Who determines how the theory, the action, the broken windows, save our streets, whatever you want to call it, stop and frisk, who determines how that gets implemented? That is where the problem, the implementation, and what happens and what goes into who does what, when, where, and why.
And just keep in mind that, you know, following up on that, you know, don't be lulled to sleep in believing that we can rely on body cam footage. Body cam footage in many circumstances can be very, very limited. In some cases, officers don't activate it when they're supposed to, or it gets turned off during incidents, or the perspective of that camera, which is resting on the chest of that officer, may not catch the actual entirety or proper angle of the incident in a way that a person who is witnessing the incident may decide to videotape and turn on that camera. And it's always helpful in cases where, you know, one is representing a plaintiff who's suing the city and the police, when, you know, we obtain footage from someone who has actually videotaped the incident. So, you know, this is cautionary for all those that don't think this is important. In fact, they say that the other side doesn't attack unless you're doing something effective. And I think this is a response to what's been happening with respect to people videotaping and the effect that is having on
Exactly.
the abuse of our citizens by officers who aren't following the law and think that they can, you know, abuse folks in the darkness and not have it come to light. So, you know, I think this is a reflection of that the other side is starting to trying to come up with ways to prevent people from videotaping altogether.
And for anyone out there that may say, oh, well, we're talking about this again, right? Well, on this show, we talk about the cultural and the legal and what affects our community. And unless something is fixed, we're going to keep on talking about it. And if you say, hey, why are you talking about this? Do we have to look no further than Michigan, right? Do we have to look no further than Patrick? I believe his last name is Lyoya, Lyoya, and what happened there, right? And if it wasn't that other people were taken, we don't know what would have happened, right? And this is another police shooting, another person dying at the hands of police over something very simplistic. Didn't have a warrant, didn't commit a crime. Maybe was driving without a driver's license, but what have you, was nothing violent about the initial stop that created a circumstance where this person is now dead. And so that's why we look for body cam. That's why we have people videoing outside. And some of the video that I've seen of this, at the end of the day, is like, where's the taser? Like, what's going on here?
It was a traffic stop. So there's just no excuse not to have at least a taser if you felt like you needed to restrain him. Like, this is ridiculous.
And I think also people, there's a certain cultural feature that has to be kept in mind here. Apparently, and I don't know if it's been delved into much, but apparently this young man came from a family that arrived there in 2014 from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And if I understand it correctly, that in the Congo, the majority language there is, the predominant language there is French. So if not, you know, some of the indigenous languages that otherwise exist, other than that. And I noticed when you see on tape the initial encounter, you even have the officers ask, do you speak English? You know, so there was, you know, it reeks of a difficulty in communication and a lack of sensitivity to that, you know? So, you know, so I think that's something to take a look at. I know this thing with taser There was apparently something reported about a struggle over the taser and or the wires because the officer had shot it twice. I don't know if you know more about that, Royce.
No, I don't know more about that, but what I do know is this. When you look at policing, you got to look at humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. You can put whatever facts you want to, and that was a great question. Isn't it the fact that he struggled for his taser and he grabbed this taser? Let's say that happened.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say he grabbed this taser. All right, so he grabbed this taser. He didn't use it on the officer. Let's say he grabbed the taser and the taser broke. Right? At the end of the day, what is this stop and arrest for? That's what we need to look at. You need to back into that. You need to back. Am I stopping this guy because he's a rapist? Am I stopping this guy because he committed a murder? Am I stopping this guy because he kidnapped a child? If you work backwards into this just a little bit, you would come to realize that this guy could run all day and all night. We going to backtrack who he is. We got the license plates of the car. The car is registered to someone. We go to the address where the car is registered. Who was driving your car, ma'am or sir? Oh, my cousin was driving it. All right. Okay. He had the car. Well, he did A, B, and C. You have enough things that you can do to back into it, right? The issue is I'll take this. Here's an example. We had the shooting in the subway in Brooklyn, in New York. Here to the whole world. Guy had a gas mask on. He shot out the subway station. Eventually, he was found. That same week, there's an individual out here in the world who's arrested for allegedly having a beer without the paper bag. And allegedly, the police chased him out of the subway and chased him on foot to catch him. Now, you hear what I'm saying? They ran out of the subway, chased a guy on foot. According to their facts, I believe it's a false arrest. But according to their facts, the reason why they arrested him because he was drinking a beer without a paper bag and he was in the subway and he came out of the and then they go chase him. My man, for real? Let's look at what we're doing.
Well, it's you could look no further than Eric Garner. Cigarettes are fine at best. You have these you have these extreme reactions that result in death. The young man, I believe, out in Minnesota who was being stopped for missing a court date, and it results in his death. I mean, things that are otherwise, innocuous, minor, or can be resolved at a later time. Like you said, we have the car here. We have your license plate. You are on foot. I believe he didn't even have proper
He was on foot. He running barefoot. He got
he got the little what is it? The little slippers and stuff.
Yeah. He had some I don't even know what they call it, Crocs or something like that.
I mean, it's
yes.
it's these. There's clearly what's in the common thread in many of these incidents is this lack of respect for the particular life that's being interacted with here by the officer, the person.
That's the point.
That if there was some affinity there, that these incidents will result in the same outcome. Because when you're able to relate, when you have an affinity to the individual you're dealing with, you take a moment to say, hey, listen, wait a minute, what's going on here? How am I gonna handle this? How am I gonna deal with this? How am I gonna go all the way on this?
And Ed, to your point, you just take that because that led to a death, right? Eric Garner. Let's take it to the point where we talk about in New Jersey, where we saw where the police officers saw the two kids fighting, right? And they both came and they ran. They took one kid, slammed him down, apparently the kid of color, right? And the other kid turns out to be Latino, but appeared to be white. They sat him down, made sure he was okay. You all right? Everything's good. Meanwhile, they handcuffed the brother and treated him as if he was committing a robbery, right? And when you said the word that you used, police officer or law enforcement would act differently if there was some affinity and some respect and humanity to the people that they were dealing with. So I take that and say, well, if those two officers in the Jersey incident thought in their brain, that could be my brother, that could be my son, that could be my nephew, let me treat those people accordingly, then what they would have did, they would have ran there, they would have broke up the fight, and they would have acted like the referee, you know, in any other place, and we'd be like, hey, man, what's going on here? What's the story? Heard both of the stories, probably slap both of them in the back of the head and say, now y'all beat it. Keep it moving. If I see you in here again, you're going to get tickets. And I don't want to see you fighting outside, you know, or if they think like there's some liability, somebody might get hurt and injured. All right, you get in the car, you go home. We're going to make sure you go home. The other one, you keep on walking. But once again, without that affinity, without that humanity, without that understanding, like, yo, that could be a member of my family. Going over and beyond. Then you don't have the actions that you're talking about. You have
and folks, I saw something the other night that was just like impactful to me. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Higher Learning.
Yes.
There was a scene at the end where the white student uses a rifle to shoot various students that were involved in a cultural celebration. And so and I can't remember his name at the time, but the young black actor who's the protagonist throughout the film runs up and eventually captures or otherwise confronts the white student who just finishes putting away his rifle and is getting ready to escape, and they get into an altercation. And the officers get there. Omar Epps, yes, thank you. And Omar Epps, and then these white police officers come. They see Omar Epps fighting the white student, and what happens? They arrest Omar Epps. They beat him to a pulp, and the white student, you know, sneaks away. He tries to completely get away, but the only reason he doesn't is because the doors in the corridor that he's going down are all locked. And the white officers still don't want to arrest him. They're like, what's wrong? What's going on? Why are you acting like this? Why you keep pulling at these doors, trying to leave, until he finally pulls out a weapon. And then and only then are they like, and even then, they're like begging him to put it down.
It's so sad.
Is art really art? Is art
imitating life?
Right? That's right.
Or life imitating art.
That's right.
So I want to just pause and thank Ronald for his comments and John for his comments as they, you know, I've been sharing them on the screen, you know, what you said. And I think John made a good point. It takes years to overcome not reacting to disrespect and all of the challenges that we see played out every day, and why it's so stressful for people of color to keep explaining over and over again when we're not treated like humans, when there isn't that level of empathy. If it's a traffic stop, why would I even need to pull out a gun? But if you see someone as a threat or the bottom of the barrel of life because of their skin color, you're not even thinking rationally about how to react in that moment. So unfortunately, until we change a lot in the culture of how we live in this country, these cases continue to come to the surface, and people involuntarily are thrust into public light now because of incidents like this. And Patrick Lyolla's family coming in from another country, I can't even imagine what they're thinking, feeling, and people have microphones in their faces trying to get reactions when they're grieving, because the last they probably knew, he was going out for one thing and never returned home. That is the part that is, it just continues to rock my world. And I know that we had some other stuff to talk about today, but
real quick, Dr. Grant, to John's point, I'm not going to take it that John meant it a certain way. The disrespect we have to understand and we have to look at how it goes both ways, right? So officers who are out there who feel disrespected over a period of time, that's why we should have these psychological evaluations that people are promoting out here over a period of time, also have to we have to understand that too, right? We have to that's our little bit of accountability to a degree. We have to understand that and how that interplays.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Because I think it's not fair to be in such a high stress environment. And because I have loved ones, friends who have chosen to protect and serve and be on the force, I know what kind of stress that comes with it. But to your point, the continuing education, the opportunities to create outlets so that you don't get burnt out, that you don't start looking at people as not people anymore because of everything that you've endured doing your job. It's layers of issues that are contributing to the cocktail of crazy. That's my description that we're living in. I'm just hopeful and prayerful.
One of the interesting features about that incident is the fact that this officer is by himself during this stop. At first, I thought he was accompanied, and then you realize that the camera in the car is taping. He gets out the car and he's totally by himself confronting two individuals, doesn't call for backup and say, hey, listen, I need assistance. I mean, they came later, but after he called it in. But yeah, well, interesting.
We already know the interesting dialogue.
Lesson to be learned here that if you stop by the police, as we saw in the body cam, don't get out of your car. That's another lesson to be learned. Don't get out of your car. Why are you getting out of your car? Stay in your car. Stay in your vehicle. Not justification.
But we also have incidents.
We have to take every lesson and learn from them. Everything. Everything is a teachable moment.
But we also, I agree, but we also had one that stayed in his car and still got killed, in front of his girlfriend. So, we will continue to pray for Patrick's family and that we get past this reality that we are in the world. But we're going to go into just one more story because time is moving quickly, and we'll save our last story for our next conversation. But this was an interesting one. Mr. Pichardo, you want to give us a little background on this $450,000 situation?
Yeah, I came upon this one. This is a case out of Kentucky, and Mr. Burling apparently suffers from some sort of anxiety disorder. And when he learns that his employer is even thinking about doing a birthday celebration at the job, he's like, no, I do not want a celebration. Please, no. And I'm just saying this is a bit of, trying to describe the incident. I haven't actually read the pleadings, but the employer has this celebration anyway. This is extremely upsetting to Mr. Burling. He leaves the room or the lunch area where this celebration is taking place against his wishes, runs out to his car, finishes his lunch there, but then sends a text to his supervisor and or employer letting him know that, hey, listen, I'm very upset that you went ahead and had this celebration for me against my wishes. He is then called into the office, and according to Burling and his lawyer, he's reprimanded, he's criticized, and as a result of the conversation that takes place in there, he is eventually sent home for 2 days and then gets a letter of termination. And what the employer is citing was that there was some violation of their workplace violence policy at work. Mr. Burling files lawsuit. He says, hey, listen, I have a disability and I'm filing under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You've discriminated against me, and you then retaliated against me, and is awarded this amount. And I'm not sure if the employer is going to appeal. I would imagine they are. Normally incidents like this don't result in this type of win. There's no discussion in this article, and I haven't looked at the pleadings as to whether there was a history of the employer disregarding or somehow not accommodating Mr. Burling's disability. But if there's a history there, then there's something there. The lesson to be learned, from this case is employers need to pay attention and recognize when, something can be, some requests, any request is linked to a possible disability that could be recognized and accommodating that disability within the limits of what the employer can accommodate without suffering some sort of, business harm or to their business or some sort of economic loss. Because as we explained on a previous show, not every accommodation request has to be granted based on a disability if the employer can legitimately make the case that they cannot grant that accommodation without, being otherwise suffering some sort of economic loss as a result, or just not having the actual physical ability to provide an accommodation given the demands of that, of that business. Here, this whole thing about a birthday party, you don't really have to celebrate a birthday. If the man said he didn't want it to be celebrated, then then that should have been assented to and said, okay, fine. I'm not sure if at the same time, don't throw me a party because I'm suffering from this anxiety disorder. What it does mention is that he had basically 2 panic attacks, one at the time of this surprise birthday party, and then after, when he's sitting with these folks and they're talking to him about it and asking him, well, why?
They're berating him. I mean, you know how those meetings went. That meeting wasn't an exploratory.
Yes.
Let me be sensitive and let me figure
Oh
out.
my gosh.
You show your insensitivity through your actions by giving the man a party when he said, I don't want a party. Now, what this does for me in support of what you're saying and culturally, so we all understand this, culturally, do not pick up your phone and decide to call Ed. And I'm saying Ed because you're not calling me. And say, I had this thing happen to me emotionally, and my employer did this. This happened in Kentucky. It is what we call a one-off. What is a one-off? Is that it happened once in a blue moon. You probably never will ever hear about a case like this, and the courts are not going to open up the floodgates to allow this type of litigation to go on. What type of litigation am I talking about? Litigation where someone is talking more of an emotional reaction than what we call traditional disabilities. Now, let me repeat what I'm saying, or let me say it differently. I think this case highlights and brings to the forefront that there can be mental and emotional disorders that employers have to now recognize, whether it is listed under the American Disability Act, or if it is, you better start to underline it, because mental and emotional health is at the forefront of what society is about nowadays. Understand that. Not giving a kid too much homework, taking a test and then taking a day off and have another test. None of that stuff that we went through, or at least what I went through when you growing up, where you got a test today and you got to test another hour and you got a paper due the next day. Everything is on balance with mental awareness and emotional stability. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying we need to recognize it. And this employer did not recognize it. Probably thought it was a joke. Or maybe here's something for the employer. No good deed goes unturned, right? Is that what they say? He thought, like, what, I'm the unpunished, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go
Unpunished.
party anyway. Ed don't know what he's talking about. I know better for Ed. No, you don't know. If I say I want a blue bicycle for Christmas, don't give me a red one, give me a blue one. Like, don't decide that you're going to do something and what you think is better than what the other person thinks. So now you throw this party. Now the man has a panic attack. There's nothing in the law that says he has to show a history of it, but now he has his attack. He put you on notice. I'm sure he went in there and said, hey, man, look, I got this condition. Not like, oh, just don't throw me a party. He put it all on the table. The guy does it anyway. And now he's paying for it. But I want to talk about one other thing before I move on within this subject matter. When we think about reasonable accommodation, we really think about it from a physical standpoint. You know, I have a herniated disc, so therefore I can't sit for a long time. I have to stand, or I have a claustrophobia, so don't put me in an interior office. Put me in an office with a window. If you don't want to put me in an office with a window, put me in a space where I can see a window or there's more space. Those are the things that we're so used to. And what I'm saying is that get used to other issues, other things that have to do with emotions, has to do with mental wear, such as in this case, which came back to lead to that type of verdict of $450,000. Now, in support of what Ed said is that
$450,000.
Right. We don't know, and this is where the media gets you, and they only do it in time and place. We don't know whether there is an appeal, and a higher court will say $450,000. No, you're not getting that. We're going to reduce that amount. But yeah. I'm sure that.
Well, we will have to watch the case.
Right, but I'm sure there was talk about selling the matter before this, but the employer probably thought there's no way in the world he's going to win this type of case. Because this happened one time in one party. So what? He has anxiety or PTS. I got people with bad backs and other issues, and they still coming in, and they still working, and they still doing things. Let's go and see. And they saw, and they'll see no more. No,
they saw because that's.
They'll see no more.
See no more. That's
they will see no more. Well, that's a great way to end the show. I can't believe we're at the top of the hour already. But interesting that you raised that point that we are going to see a different way that life is evaluated on jobs, and what human resources and the employment law will start having to address thanks to good old COVID. But it's time for us to wrap up today's show. We're going to talk about another topic that we had and keep that in for next week, because there's still some more where the legal meets the cultural happening across the country. But today's dialogue was definitely one that allowed us to talk about some of the current issues of the day, as well as acknowledge those who have transitioned. So final words, gentlemen, before we close out.
Just wanted to say to folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today and you found it educational, and thank you for the participation and the commentaries throughout.
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel sad for those that can't catch us live, because I'm sure as we doing the replay, people got questions and they want to say something and they trying to get it in. And John is around.
Yeah. And Roland is here. Yeah.
I know you can't get off of work. The employer's not going to give you reasonable accommodation to come watch our show. I get it. It ain't going to happen. We have it at 4 o'clock. But, as Ed said, thank you for participating. We'll see you on the radio, right?
Yes, hashtag replay if you catch the replay. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Be safe, stay well, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.